Today we are talking about continental drift. And continental drift, it's an idea that our land masses, our continents, they once were all together to make a supercontinent that we called Pangea. And then they broke apart something like 200 million years ago, and they drifted or moved from that giant landmass to where they are today. And that's kind of the general idea of continental drift. And this idea was first presented actually by a meteorologist named Alfred Wegener. He was a German scientist, and his story is really cool, but it's also really sad at the same time. And we're going to take a look at his evidence and his theory. Like I had just said, Alfred Wegener's idea of continental drift was the beginning of how we currently understand how our plates move and how our continents are located where they're located today. It all started with Pangea. That was the name of the supercontinent when all of our continents were together in one spot. From there, they broke apart, drifting to where they are today. There was really 4 pieces of evidence Alfred Wegener kind of referenced for continental drift. The first one was matching fossils. And these matching fossils, they're found actually all over the world, but 2 in particular he focused on were Mesosaurus and Glossopteris. All right, Mesosaurus was actually a swimming organism, but it couldn't swim like an ocean. And its fossils were found both in Africa and South America. And it can't swim across the Atlantic Ocean. So how could this one organism be found on 2 different continents if it can't swim across the ocean? And the idea is that during Pangea, when their continents were together, the organism had free reign of a territory. And then once continental drift occurred and the supercontinent broke apart, the continents, they moved, and the fossils that were on either continent were separated now by an ocean. Very similar, Glossopteris is a plant. Okay, it's a flower. And that flower is, again, found in 2 different areas separated by an ocean, and it can't float across the ocean, it can't sail through the air, so how could it be fossilized in 2 different areas? And again, it's the same idea. During Pangea, it grew, it died, it was fossilized, and then the continents moved apart after that. The second piece of evidence are matching rock types. And yes, you can match up rock types from around the world. And the ones we're talking about here occur in both North America and also in Europe. And when Pangea formed, because Pangea wasn't the first giant landmass, it's just the most recent. When Pangea formed, it formed because of a collision of all of our continents colliding in one spot. And that collision produced really big mountains, very similar to the Himalayas or maybe the Alps of today. But that long chain of mountains was broken in 2 by continental drift. And one set of mountains is here in the US, we call them the Appalachians, they're on the East Coast. And the same matching mountain range is called something else, the Caledonian Mountains in Northern Europe. We also have evidence of ancient climates. So climates in areas that just don't make any sense. Examples might be India or parts of Africa having evidence of glaciers. Okay, when you think of India, you don't think of glaciers, but it used to be covered by glaciers, and there's evidence of that through striations, these big grooves in the bedrock, okay, the rock layer from the underside of a glacier. Because a glacier is really more like a dirty snowball, it has a whole bunch of rocks in it. It's not just all ice. It has a lot of debris in it as well. And therefore it's almost like sandpaper. So the bottom of a glacier being sandpaper with this massive weight forcing down on it puts scratches in rock layers. And we find them in places that today are really, really warm, like I was saying with Australia and India and parts of Africa. And the very last piece of evidence Alfred Wegener used was just simply the puzzle pieces. Our continents, some of them very closely look like they're puzzle pieces that just fit together. And off the top of my head, the most clear puzzle pieces is South America and Africa. How South America looks like it could tuck right into Africa. So if you're looking at a map, Alfred Wegener's evidence seems really good. But why was his theory rejected by his fellow scientists, even with this really great evidence? And it really boils down to one word: the mechanism. The mechanism of continental drift. He didn't really have a good explanation of why the continents are moving around in the first place. When he was really forced to give an answer, his answer just didn't make a lot of sense. He would say that the tidal forces, the gravitational pull of the moon, caused the continents to plow through the ocean. And just looking at a map, we don't see any evidence for that. First of all, tidal forces aren't strong enough to pull on continents themselves. And the second thing, there's no rock deformation that supports this idea of plowing through the ocean crust. When I think of plowing, I think of shoveling my driveway. And I don't know about you, but I just put the shovel down and I run down my driveway. And I know that snow starts to build up in the front of the shovel, but when the front of the shovel is full, what happens to all of that extra snow? Yeah, it goes out the sides next to the shovel. And so if we have continents plowing through the ocean, you would expect rocks to do the same thing. You would expect rocks to be built up in front of a continent the direction it was moving. And then you'd expect to see some sort of deformation from the plowing that the continent was doing. And we just don't see that. So the way that it works is if part of your theory is good and part of it is bad, it doesn't actually really matter. They're not separated at all. So because he couldn't support his idea with a good mechanism, his fellow scientists just crumpled up his idea and threw it in the trash can. And so Alfred Wegener probably left those meetings defending his theory, feeling very much defeated and feeling like a failure. And that's the thing that's so sad about his story, because sometime later, just a handful of years, he actually died in a blizzard in Greenland. And so he never really saw through continental drift. He never got a chance to realize how great of a theory he really had once we provided that mechanism. And so his idea, although it got trashed in his days, it was actually resurrected, and we see it as being this brilliant idea that led us on this path to plate tectonics. So it's a really sad story, and it's even so sad that people kind of remember him in song, which I'm going to throw in at the end of the video. All right, so if you have any questions, please make sure to ask. Otherwise, please listen to the Alfred Wegener song. Oh, it touches my heart every time. Okay, thanks.
In the year of 1910, there was a scientist whose name was Alfred Wegener. He noticed that the continents looked just like pieces of a broken puzzle. By 1915, he called it Continental Drift. It caused a rift with his fellow scientists who sang, "Ha ha, Alfred Wegener, you are a crazy man. Ha ha, Alfred Wegener, you are a crazy little man." They reminded him he had no proof for how or why the continents could do this. And until you show just how or why, you merely have one interesting hypothesis. Until this evidence we see, you don't have a theory. Ha ha, Alfred Wegener, you are a crazy man. Ha ha, Alfred Wegener, you are a crazy little man. In the year of 1930, on an expedition to Greenland, Wegener got caught in a blizzard. When they finally found him, it was much too late, and they buried him in an icy mausoleum. 30 years after he died, a new idea came to light. It changed the way geologists saw the world and brought continental drift back to life. Now everybody sings, yeah!